Hey guys, welcome back to Orange Sufi, and today we are bringing back this long-awaited series of Canadian provinces and territories stats. Well, basically, it's kind of like the last stats, but we're doing Canadian, okay? And a little disclaimer: as an American, Canada has how should I put this? Low amount of them. Like they have like 13 of them, okay? So let's get on with the video. So first, we're obviously going to do size, okay? Total, water, and land area, all three of them. So first, we are going to do water area. So in third place, the third biggest in water area is Ontario, with a water area of 158,654 kilometers squared, which is also 61,257 miles squared for you Americans, Myanmarians, and Liberians, which makes up 14.7% of their total area. The second biggest is Northwest Territories, which has a water area of 163,021 kilometers squared, which is also 62,943 miles squared, which makes up 12.1% of its total area. And the absolute biggest is Quebec, with the water area of 176,928 kilometers squared, which is also 68,312 miles squared, and which makes up 11.5% of its total area. But okay, so the third smallest, which is also 11th biggest, is Nova Scotia. Okay, with the water area of 2,342 kilometers squared, which is also 904 miles squared, which makes up 4.2% of its total area. Its 12th biggest or second smallest is New Brunswick, which has a water area of 1,458 kilometers squared, which is also 568 miles squared, which makes up 2% of its total area. And the smallest, or the 13th biggest, Prince Edward Island, with the water area of 0 kilometers squared and with 0 miles squared, which makes up 0% of its total area. And another disclaimer is that some of this information may not be correct. All of this information may be used with all this information is used by the incredibly short time yeah, because it took amount of short time from the start of this presentation to right now making this video. A short amount of time, actual researching and doing, yeah. So all of this may not be correct, so let's get on with it. Next, we're actually going to do land area. So the third biggest is Quebec, with a land area of 1,365,128 kilometers squared, which is also 527,079 miles squared, which makes up 88.5% of its total area. The second biggest, Northwest Territories, which has a land area of 1,346,106 kilometers squared, which is also 456,792 miles squared, which makes up 87.9% of its total area. And the biggest is Nunavut, with the land area of 1,877,787 kilometers, which is also 725,018 miles squared, which makes up 92.1% of its total area. But the third smallest is New Brunswick, with the land area of 71,450 kilometers squared, which is also 27,590 miles squared, which makes up 98% of the total area. and then the second smallest is Nova Scotia with the land area of 52,942 kilometers squared, which is also 20,441 miles squared, which makes up 95.8% of its total area. And our absolute smallest is, you guessed it, Prince Edward Island, with the land area of 5,660 kilometers squared, which is also 2,190 miles squared, makes up 100% of its total area. Since it has no lakes or rivers, well, it does have rivers, but it has no inland rivers. Yeah, I should say that. So, and finally, our last one of the area, our total area. So, our third biggest, Northwest Territories in total area, which has a total area of 1,183,085 kilometers squared, which is also 519,734 miles squared. And if Northwestern Territories were a actual real country, it would be the 26th biggest. That means it's bigger than Colombia, but still smaller than South Africa. Our second biggest, Quebec, which has a total area of 1,542,056 kilometers squared, which is also 595,391 miles squared. And if Quebec was actually a real country, it would be the 20th biggest, bigger than Peru and smaller than Mongolia. And the absolute biggest is Nunavut, with the total area of 2,038,722 kilometers squared, which is also 787,155 miles squared. And if it was a real country, it would be the 14th biggest, bigger than Mexico, but smaller than Saudi Arabia. And the third smallest is New Brunswick, with the total area of 72,907 kilometers squared, which is also 28,150 miles squared. And if it was a country, it would be the 120th largest, which is bigger than Sierra Leone, but smaller than Panama. And the second smallest, Nova Scotia, with a total area of 55,287 kilometers squared. 84 kilometers squared, which is 21,345 miles squared. And if it was a real country, it would be 128th biggest, bigger than Bosnia and Herzegovina, but smaller than Croatia. And the smallest, Prince Edward Island, with an area of 5,660 kilometers squared, and in miles, it's 2,190 miles squared. And if it were a real country, it would be the 172 biggest island. Well, we're counting territories too. And so it will be bigger than Trinidad and Tobago, but smaller than Brunei. So we're on to our next segment, population. Okay? As of August 20th of 2021, we had found an updated source, which was 2022. Well, it was 2022 estimated, so yeah. So the third most populous, British Columbia, with a population of 5,264,485. And that is basically so if British Columbia was a real country, it would be the 120th most populous. That means it's more popular than Oman, but still less people than Norway. Our second most populous, Quebec, which has 8,639,7 642 people. And if Quebec was a real country, it would be the 102nd most populous country. And so it will be more popular than Togo, but still has less population than Switzerland. And our most populous, our absolute most populous, can you guess it? It's Ontario, because it has Toronto right next to Detroit, which is basically on that little panhandle. Well, we have a population of 14,951,825 people. And if it was a country, it would be the 74th most populous. So that means it will be more popular than Zimbabwe, but still less populous than Somalia. But our third least populous is Northwest Territories, with a population of 45,640. And if Northwest Territories were a country slash territory, which it already is, it would be the 213th most populous. That means it's still more popular than Saint Martin, which I think is the Dutch part of the island, Saint Martin, but still but still less populous than the Faroe Islands. And next, Yukon, which has a population of 42,982, which is pretty close to Northwest Territories. But if it was a country, it would be the 213th biggest, like Northwest Territories. So it would be bigger than Saint Martin and Faroe Islands, since it has a big margin. Okay, so our 13th, our least populous, is Nunavut, with 39,710 people. And fun fact, the most northern town is actually in Nunavut. It's called Alert. Anyways, if Nunavut was a country, it would be the 214th biggest country. Oh well, most populous country. That means it has more population than Monaco, but still less population than Saint Martin. And our next subcategory, population density. So our third most dense province is Ontario, which is 15.94 per kilometer squared, or 41.3 people per mile squared. And if it was a country, it would be the 211th most dense country. That means it has it's more dense than Chad, but still less dense than New Caledonia. And our second most dense is Nova Scotia, with the population density of 18.31 people per kilometer squared, which is also 42.4 people per mile squared. And if it were a country, it would be the 200th most population density, which is still which is more than New Zealand, but less than South Sudan. And our most population dense country is Prince Edward Island, which has a population density of 27.27 people per kilometer, which is also 70.6 people per mile squared. And if it were a country, it would be the 184th most population density, which is more populous than Somalia, but still less populous than Angola. Our third least populous province or territory is Yukon, with 0.08 people per kilometer, or 0.2 people per mile. and it would be the 236th most population dense uh, country. That means it will be smaller than Greenland, which is the absolute last. Okay, absolute last, dead last. So that means all of this. That means the second least dense Northwest Territories with 0.03 people per kilometer or 0.08 people per mile squared, it has the exact same ranking. And also the least most populous Nunavut with the population density of 0.02 people per square kilometer, which is also 0.05 people per square mile, which is basically the same ranking as every single other. And finally, GDP. We're almost at the end, which is 2021 estimate. And our our most wealthy province or territory, Alberta, with a GDP of 326.433 billion Canadian dollars, which is also 352.884 billion USD. And if Alberta were a country, it will be the 32nd most wealthy country, which is more wealthy than South Africa, but still less than Israel. And our second wealthiest country is Quebec, with a GDP of 380.972 billion Canadian dollars, which is also 460.357 billion USD. And if it were a country, it would be the 25th most wealthiest, which is more wealthy than Thailand, but still less than Belgium. And the absolute richest, most wealthiest is Ontario, with the wealth of 763.276 billion Canadian dollars, which is also 891.811 billion USD. And if it were a country, it would be the 17th most richest, which is basically the border between billions and trillions. It's still more wealthy than Turkey, but still less than Indonesia. And our third poorest is Northwestern Territory, which has a GDP of 4.856 billion Canadian dollars, which is also 4.542 billion US dollars. And our if Northwest Territories were a country, it would be the 151st most wealthiest, which is more wealthy than Montenegro, but still less than the Maldives. And finally, our second least richest is Nunavut, with a GDP of 2.846 billion Canadian dollars, which is also 3.689 billion USD. And if Nunavut was a country, it would be the 156th most wealthiest, which has more GDP than Guyana, but still less than Sierra Leone. And our poorest is Yukon, with a GDP of 3.0989 billion Canadian dollars, which is also 3.157 billion USD. And if Yukon was a country, it would be the 159th most wealthiest, which is still more wealthy than the micro country of Andorra, but still smaller than Burundi, the poorest country per capita. And that brings us to our next segment, GDP per capita. So our third biggest GDP per capita is Yukon, with a GDP per capita as with 75,141 Canadian dollars, which is also 58,080 USD. But if it were a country, it would be the 13th most per capita, which is still more than the Netherlands but less than San Marino. Our second most GDP per capita is Alberta, with the GDP per capita of 78,100 Canadian dollars, which is also 60,367 USD, which makes it ninth most GDP per capita, which is basically Hong Kong, more than Hong Kong, but less than Brunei. And our richest is Northwestern Territories, with a GDP per capita with 108,065 Canadian dollars, which is also 85,529 USD. And if it were a country, it would be the fifth most richest, which is more than Switzerland but less than Qatar. Our third poorest in GDP per capita is New Brunswick, with the GDP per capita with as 49,218 Canadian dollars, which is also 38,043 USDs. And if it were a country, it would be the 50th most wealthiest, and it will be more wealthy than Andorra, but still less than Italy. And our second poorest is Prince Edward Island, with GDP per capita as 48,039 Canadian dollars, which is also 37,132 USD. And if it were a country, it would be the 52nd most wealthiest, which means it's still more wealthy than the U.S. Virgin Islands, but still less than Equatorial Guinea. And the 13th, our poorest, is Nova Scotia, with a GDP per capita as 47,837 Canadian dollars, which is also 36,976 USD, and it will be the 53rd most wealthiest country, more wealthy than Israel, but still less than the U.S. Virgin Islands. And that brings us to the end to our video, and our next episode is in the Mexico States. So, disclaimer, most of this may not be true, okay? It will change from time to time, cause yeah. Anyways, goodbye.